All right. Well, it has been, although there have been podcast episodes that I have dropped, like several of them before this particular podcast episode. I have, most of them were pre-recorded and for a good reason. I've been working a lot of overtime here recently. Probably the total accumulation of overtime for at least 2 months now. And what that does actually is it gets me, quite frankly, I'm back in the field for the most part. And what that ultimately means is that at a small company like the one that I work for, we kind of get to experiment a little bit. So in other words, someone like myself who technically has the title of safety manager also wears a superintendent or a construction manager hard hat. It just depends on what the customer needs and what the company needs at that time. Now, this is not a problem for me because what it does is it helps me to refocus on some things that, kind of gives me, let's say, some ammunition or some things to actually talk about, some fuel, as it were. And one of those things that what you're going to talk about today in this podcast episode, actually, it's a couple of them, but one of those things that I want to specifically address is the tendency. And this is a tendency that is customer, contractor, and people oriented, meaning the people that reside in the customer realm, the people that you actually interact with, the customers, the contractors, the people that are in the whatever tier of the echelon you want. These people in here, they all have a part to play. And quite frankly, a lot of them they might be unaware of what they're doing, or they might be unaware. But most of them, if not all of them, are unaware of the outcomes of what they're doing. And to some degree, that's what I'm pushing back against. Always. And this podcast, of course, as I've said multiple times, is an extension of what I do on the website. It's not vice versa. The website isn't something that is born out of, I started a podcast first, and then I just started having a website because that's how, the whole thing typically works. It's the other way around. What I write is born largely what I experience or out in the field or what have you. And then I decided, after conversing with a number of individuals that, okay, I'll start a podcast, and that's just an extension of that which I write. And it's just an extension of the of the website itself. And, but I get all this ammunition, and it's all this stuff that I'm pushing back against and trying to, if you will, connect the dots for people to try and understand what's taking place. And today's podcast episode, we're going to specifically and, distinctively mention two things, that I hope, after the end of this podcast, if you are an individual that either makes decisions like this or, you have a bias in this direction, or you happen to be an individual that's had decisions made against you, well, then let's, maybe you'll be able to share this out. Maybe I'm able to articulate to a better degree about what you're experiencing and how other people need to really take another look around and go, okay, he's making a lot of sense here. All right. And here's the first one. Just the other day on a job site, I'm intentional, very, very intentional, by the way, of hiring apprentices. Very, if I know that I've got a manpower issue, I need some manpower, I will call the apprentice coordinator. That's the first person I call. I'm not where we communicate all the time. And I'm always like, hey, do you have an apprentice? Do you have an apprentice? Do you have an apprentice? There is some merit to me asking for a third or fourth year apprentice if we have one available. but that's not always the case. And the reason why that is because when they come to me, I'm going to give them a certain amount of, let's say, experience, but I don't want them to only learn from me if I can possibly help it. And so typically what happens is if I can get that person that's a third or fourth year apprentice, well, they've worked for other contractors, maybe doing other types of work at different places, and they're a little bit more well-rounded. I don't want to, let's say, box an apprentice in, if you will, and that an apprentice doesn't get as wide a variety of experience as possible. However, my company is growing. We're growing at the customer base, the industry base. We're growing at what we do, who we do it for, et cetera. So I'm fairly confident that I can offer apprentices a wider variety of experience. I also attempt to gauge the level of, let's say, interest and skill that apprentices come in. Some apprentices come in and they are completely what we call green, meaning they don't know or have real experience at almost anything, to be honest with you. And then there are some who have a decent amount of skill, and I'm pretty pleased with that. And here today, I see this wide variety, this wide range, not just of ages, which is kind of refreshing too, but also of skill and life experience. And this is a whole different podcast episode, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. But here is the first tenet of this podcast episode, and that's when you hire apprentices, or if you have apprentices on the job, they do not need to just be, and I'm speaking from the building trades, and I'm an iron worker by trade, they don't just need to be fire watching. They don't just need to be doing small, menial tasks. What good does it do that apprentice or your company or your local or the industry or even the customer themselves if the vast majority of what this apprentice does is actual meaningless, it's not quite meaningless, but it's menial work and not something substantive. If they need some, time with a torch, then that's what they need. They don't need to watch another journeyman if the journeyman can show that apprentice how to use a torch. And then here's the second thing, to give them time behind it to hone their skills. And if you are a customer or an industry professional, I don't believe you serve your best interests long-term, the industry's best interest, and you're certainly not serving that individual, that apprentice, their best interest by specifically wanting just the journeyman on the job to do the actual work. Because what happens? There's a common theme, a common thread behind this. I want journeymen. I want good journeymen. How do you think the journeyman on the job got the experience that they got? Spoiler alert, that question was rhetorical. They got the experience by doing. Somebody somewhere allowed them time behind a torch, time behind a welding shield. Somebody allowed them to, rig. Somebody, for you electricians, somebody allowed them to wire things up. Somebody, for you pipe fitters, right? Somebody allowed an apprentice the opportunity maybe to fit something up, maybe to strike some arcs on the pipe side. You can take this and apply it to whatever craft, whether it's boilermakers, crane operators, whatever. We don't need to be expressing incredulity when we have apprentices doing work. That's precisely what they need. That's precisely what the company needs. This is precisely what the industry needs. And if I'm so blunt, this is precisely what the customer needs. Now, the customer in particular is especially guilty of this thought process that they only want, certain skilled journeymen to do the work. This is all we want. We want the best. We want the best. We want the best. As if, journeymen, right? And I'm an iron worker. So as if a union journeyman iron worker or a pipe fitter or a boiler maker, crane operator, whatever, we want somebody with 20 years of experience. Right now, we only want the best. That's what everybody wants. As if to say you don't have some form, some type of responsibility. Yeah, I said responsibility, where you have to allow apprentices to actually do the work, allow the company that you have employed to do whatever it is that you have employed them to do, to allow them the wherewithal to allow apprentices under obviously supervision to do the work so that they can garner up that experience, so that 10 years from now, you're not staring at a barren wasteland looking for people to do the work, and all the while they're starting to retire. This is how we got into the point and the situation that we're at in the first place. This ridiculous, this unsustainable demand that we only have journeymen, and we only have, and I'll get to my next point in a few minutes, but that we only have journeymen. Everybody wants 20-year veteran journeymen. Everybody wants them. Guess what? They're so few and far between, it's not even funny. It's not funny. It's absolutely true. As somebody who is in their mid 40s, the number of millennials with a lot of time and, as in their background for experience purposes is so small, it's not even funny. Now, there's a reason for this. We won't hash this out. But because of the customer demand, oftentimes because of the customer's ridiculous demand, that they only have apprentices, that they only have qualified journeymen, and that they only have apprentices doing stuff that they think in their minds apprentices should be doing, fire watch, picking up trash, dumb stuff like this, that yes, it needs to be done. But I also have and I'll say this to a degree, I believe as a 20-year apprentice instructor and somebody that works for a company vested in the industry, I believe that I have a moral responsibility to take apprentices and develop them and turn them into journeymen, and to turn journeymen into foremen, and to turn foremen into superintendents, at least, the ones that are going to be able to handle the job. Everybody's going to become a journeyman. But from then on out, I believe I still have a moral responsibility to take those who are superintendent material to that level, so on and so forth. But every apprentice needs time to do all of the various tasks that they can potentially do. And we have to stop allowing our mindset to slip into this incredibly disingenuous thought behavioral process where we only want 20-year journeymen to do the work. And then 10 years down the road, we don't have 20-year journeymen to do the work. And if you do have journeymen that have a number of years of experience, they've got just time. Time doesn't mean experience, by the way. You could be in a craft for 15 years and only done one specific little sliver of something. You don't have a wide variety of experience. And that is what a lot of customers and a lot of contractors are staring down the face of, is having, if they follow down this trajectory of, I only want this person, I only want the best of this, I only want the best of that. In 10 years' time, you've got people who've got 10, 12 years, 14, 15 years in. But because they were not allowed, we didn't develop them. We didn't allow them to be developed from the customer or the contractor perspective. We didn't allow them. We didn't intentionally, raise them up. They have far less skill and experience for the time that they've got into this trade than their predecessors. And the reason why is because they weren't allowed to work, whether it's the contractor or the customer. And this is crazy to me. If you have paid me to do a job as a client, right? You're my customer. You're my client. You're paying me for a finished product. You want X, Y, and Z done. Okay, great. Thank you for the work. Now, provided that I turn in a safe, finished product, leave it alone and let me put people where they need to go. And I'm specifically directing at apprentices in this specific discussion, because apprentices need to be able to do the work. If I give you a delivered finished product that is professional, it's incumbent on me, like I said earlier, I believe I have a moral responsibility to raise up apprentices and turn them into journeymen, and I can't do it. And no other foreman can do it. No other superintendent can do it. Nobody can do it if we're having this irrational perspective rule the day where we don't believe that apprentices should be doing the work, or we think it's crazy that an apprentice is doing the work. Well, journeymen are right there. It's possible that journeyman just could be lazy making that guy do the work. It's also just as likely that he's allowing him the experience. So that's the point. The first point that I wanted to kind of address in this podcast is that the industry needs to get on board with the concept and idea that apprentices actually need to be doing work. I don't care if they're first years or not. That's on me as a company, as a contractor, to assess this person's skill set, utilize them where they're good, and develop where they're not, so that they can be even better, well-rounded. Not only do we need to hire apprentices, my God, we need to develop apprentices. And we cannot develop them if we're not willing to work, or on the customer side of the house, we're not willing to allow the contractors that perform the work to actually do the work. That's point number one. Point number two, when I was younger, so in 2 months' time, I will start my 25th year into this industry. And I remember as an apprentice, and I can't really remember who said this to me, but somebody did, and it stuck. They said, "Do you know what's worse than a green apprentice?" And I said, "No." And they said, "A green journeyman." And I thought about it, and the reason I was really contemplating it is because, this is probably my second or third year in. And I thought to myself, this person, what they just said sounds, pretty slanderous, but you know what? He's 100% right. And here's the situation that happens all of the time. If I get a guy that has just graduated the apprenticeship, so let's say he's got 5 years in. We got a 4-year apprenticeship. He graduates, and he's got 5 years in. Listen, I've been in 24 years. There are so many different, as an iron worker, I'll just go ahead and tell you now, I think there's more facets to our trade as iron workers than any other craft. You're talking, there's rigging, there's machinery moving, there's fabrication, there's installation, there's ornamental, there's reinforcing, there's post and pre-tensioning, there's bridges, there's structural, there's industrial. I mean, there's so many facets and so many like niche things that being an iron worker can actually bring out, and that you can see people doing some very complex things. There are things that in 24 years I have not had the pleasure of working. So if I go on a job as somebody with a fair amount of experience and there are things that I haven't done, how much more so is this going to be true for the guy who's got 5 years in or 6 years in? What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, to me, it looks like the guy that's got 5 and 6 years, he does not have as much experience. But if I'm the customer and I say I need journeyman ironworkers and they come on the job, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to some degree, because I think this guy is a journeyman that should have 15 years of experience, all wrapped up into somebody who's got 5. And what does this mean, though? That's the valid question. It means, again, as contractors, we don't just magically stop developing people when they're done with the apprenticeship. If you have that mindset, it's wrong. And you're setting the contractor, which is yourself, you're setting other contractors, you're setting the industry, and you're certainly setting the customer and that journeyman up all for failure. This idea that somehow because an apprentice has graduated and he's got a couple more years on an apprentice, that he should have like 15 years of experience in 2 years is absolutely ridiculous. We have to develop and to continue to develop those individuals. That means I'll give you a great example. If I know I've got this work and this work and this work, and I'm, compartmentalizing this type of work up. If I know that I've got this type of work and I'm, trying to staff it out with people, I have, again, more responsibility in my mind. I need to go, okay, how can I satisfy the requirements that I have to finish an end product, I have to provide an end product for the customer. And obviously as a contractor, we need to make money, but there are other factors or other variables in the equation. Who could glean or learn the most on this project X? Who can help me accomplish this project? Who can I help develop even more from this project? And oh, by the way, how can I throw an apprentice in there? You see what I did? I was very intentional about continuing to develop those people. There is something about the trades. I mean, you hear it all the time in the white collar world about professional development and all this nonsense. And I'm not saying it doesn't have any value. I typically value personal development far, far and above professional development for a number of reasons. But at the very end, it's just, tipping my hat, if you will, to the fact that professional development is talked about continually, it seems like, in the white collar world. And yet, for some strange, crazy reason, it never, ever is a topic that is discussed in the blue collar field, within the trades. And so here I am as a union iron worker going, how do I develop the next generation? Well, I need to hire apprentices and I need to put them to work, which is the first point. And then morphing into my second point, which is what we're currently talking about, which is I need to remember that this guy has 6 years in, not 15 years in. And I can't expect him to give me 15-year, JIW or pipe fitter, or if you're an electrician, I can't expect a guy that's got 6 years in to give me 15 years worth of experience. It's not feasible. It's irrational. And the customer is the same exact way. And they too need to be made aware that just because you want somebody with 20 years of experience doesn't mean we've already addressed this. They're all working, and everybody who is worth their salt is going to continue to work. So I have to develop. I have to play the long game in developing these. So if I have a guy who's got 6 or 7 years or whatever, I can't expect him to give me 20-year, iron worker or pipe fitter or, electrician experience. And guess what? You shouldn't either. Talking about the customer. What you should be concerned with is the end product. And, I take I've already said that I believe I have the moral responsibility. But for customers, you have to think long-term as well. I know in the finance world, those idiots up there, all they think about is the next quarter. They're not thinking about longevity. I'm thinking about longevity, and as customers, you should be thinking about longevity. Who's going to take care of your projects 10 years from now? Even for the journeyman. If we just irrationally think that I should have a guy with 15 years of experience when he's got 6, I have to develop them. I have to take them not just from a green apprentice and turn them into a green journeyman, but then I have to take them from a green journeyman and take them to a seasoned journeyman. I personally believe that what we are seeing and what I am discussing currently right now is the outcome of a instant gratification, give me it right now, shortcut culture that we're currently in. And we've been in for quite some time. And if I may add, it's part of the problem. It's part of the reason that we have this problem in the first place, which is this age and experience gap. And it's going to continue to grow and to continue to worsen if customers aren't made aware, and if they don't get their head out of the sand, and contractors don't get their head out of the sand and think that headhunting is going to solve your problems. It's not. I and you who might be listening, who are on the front lines, have to take the time and the intentionality to take apprentices and actually allow them to do work to garner skill and experience, and then turn around and once they become journeymen, do the same freaking thing. Because why would you want to raise up apprentices that when they get done, they have a severely limited skill set, and then you got a customer, and as a contractor, you have the audacity to sit here and to complain about a journeyman who, as an apprentice, you didn't let him do anything, and so now he's not worth anything as a journeyman. Well, no wonder. You set him up or her for failure. You did that. How can you have the audacity to sit there and complain about the outcome when you never intentionally tried to develop them in the first place, to give them the opportunity to hone their skill set and develop them? You should look in yourself in the mirror. This is contractors and customers and everybody else that's associated with this problem, and say, shame on me. That's what you should say. And that's the reality. And this is why to a large degree, I'm kind of grateful that I get the opportunity to go out in the field and to get around other foremen and say, look, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do that. Because I'm to be blunt with you, I don't ever I want to run jobs. I run complex projects. I mean, the one that we're on, the one that I'm on now is, I'm moving some serious weight, over 7 million pounds, and then dressing things out and complex rigging and all kinds of stuff. That stuff's fun. That stuff's really fun. But you know what I get real enjoyment out of? Taking apprentices and turning them into journeymen. Taking journeymen and turning them into foremen. At least the ones that are, what I can tell, have the wherewithal to be. And out of that pool of foremen, taking them and turning them into superintendents. Or, to put it another way, developing the next generation. And I can't do it. It's a hot button topic for me. I can't do it if I have people that try and stand in my way and not, have this hesitancy, this reluctance to allow those people with less skill and experience to actually do the work. Apprentices and younger journeymen. Younger meaning younger in years' time in the field. They have to do the work. They have to be developed. And we have to do it. And shame on us if we don't. If we have irrational expectations that we're not trying to, intentionally develop the next generation. We say we want all these things, but are we really willing to put the work in? I know that I am. And to be blunt with you, I know that there's a whole lot of young people coming into this trade or trades in general, plural. And it's all, a lot of times it's a lot of older people not willing to teach, not willing to develop, not willing to mentor, not willing to show them and hone them for their own personal benefit, in addition to the industry and the contractor and the customer base. It's a lot of older folks, to be blunt. So what I say to you then is shame on you for that. Shame on you. We should be exceptionally intentional about training up the next generation. And we can't do it. Especially for those of us who are actually, hyper laser focused on doing it. We can't do it when everybody seems to be conspiring because they just want seasoned journeymen to do the work. We have to turn these people into seasoned journeymen. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It doesn't happen just out of nowhere. We don't have a genie that we can sit here and make 3 wishes. It happens by intentionality and giving them the work to do. We have to be intentional about it. And for those of you who are hesitant about it, you need to get your head out of the sand, re-listen to this podcast if that's what it takes. I don't care. But they have to be able to do the work, and we have to be able to develop them. Okay? All right, there it is. Let me get off my soapbox now. I'm going to go ahead and end this podcast episode with one invite. If you are listening to this podcast episode and you are a journeyman and you have a story to tell, or you'd like to be a guest on this podcast, and most certainly if you are an apprentice and you would like to be a guest, look into the description of the show notes wherever you're listening, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. A link to the contact page on the website will be there. And lastly, if you're an industry professional, somebody who has some input, who wants to have a substantive, robust dialogue about the state of the industry, whatever, I would love to have a conversation with you. I'm a very naturally curious person. The contact page link will be in the description show notes, and I would love to talk. So there it is. All right. Point number 1, point number 2 of this podcast episode. Thanks for taking the time to listen. And as always, stay safe out there.